call them landmarks because they mark the land. They dot our city. Steeples and domes framed against Cleveland's burgeoning skyline. To commuters scurrying in and out of town on the freeways, they can seem forbidding, darkened, even closed. But there are many viable holy places in Cleveland that are not only filled with people, but also treasures from across the ages. There are incredible Tiffany stained glass windows, preserved relics, one dedicated by the Pope, joyous celebrations, and contemplative prayer. Some of the most beautiful paintings, icons, and altars to be found anywhere in the world. Carved wood that defies description. Architectural gems that astound, rendering first-time visitors speechless. There are even cemeteries inside cathedrals. We're going to look at some of Cleveland's sacred landmarks, talk to the people who worship in them, visit their neighborhoods, and join them in their celebrations. Many landmarks are fighting to survive. Others have lost the battle. Many of them are the center for preserving old customs and wonderful traditions. These houses of worship and the wonders inside them reflect Cleveland's ethnic heritage. From its founding pioneers to its newest congregations, we're going to look at Holy Cleveland and why we should all care deeply about these places. Early churches looked much like St. Christopher's by the River in Gates Mills. Originally built in 1853 as a Methodist place of worship by the town's founder, Holes E. Gates, it was served by a multitude of circuit-riding preachers. Old-timers used to say that there were so many preachers riding the circuit that parishioners would say a noise in the bush was either a bear or a Methodist minister. After many years, the church was converted to an Episcopalian ministry, and the faith's first communion was held there in 1926. The church's simple, dignified beauty still gives worshipers a wonderful feeling of a bygone era that launched Cleveland's religious history. Early religion in the area was dominated by white Protestants from New England, and the oldest consecrated building in Cuyahoga County is located on Cleveland's near west side. Historic St. John's Episcopal is on Church Avenue at West 26th Street. The congregation shares with that of Trinity Cathedral the distinction of being a direct descendant of the first Episcopal body in the Cleveland area and among the earliest churches. St. John's Parish laid the cornerstone for their impressive Gothic Revival building in 1836. The building was designed and constructed by Hezekiah Eldridge, a master builder responsible for several early Western Reserve buildings.
Now this church is a mother church of Trinity Cathedral, St. Luke's, and All Saints in Palmer. Was started as missions from this church.
Edna Hamilton is the senior warden at St. John's, and Lois Geltzer is a longtime parishioner. They think they know why the church was built.
The people that wanted to build this church was in a saloon, and they said it was on a Sunday morning, and the saloon was about 2 blocks from here. And they said the women and their children needed some churching. They didn't think about themselves, they just wanted the women to go to church.
One of the best-known traditions of St. John's Parish is its place in the Underground Railroad of the 1850s and 60s. Escaped slaves are said to have been secreted in the church, awaiting ships that would take them to Canada and freedom.
They said there was a tunnel from the church to the river, and they could go through that to the river.
Without parishioners like Edna and Lois, who collectively have given the church over 80 years of service, churches couldn't go on. That's why they've endured. St. John has also survived a variety of disasters, a fire in 1866 and a tornado that tore its roof off in 1953. But the faithful have hung in through all the problems.
First me and my husband, and then my sons came, and then their sons came, and now the great-grandchildren are here.
You really should visit, even just to see it, because there are not many churches that are small and look as well as ours does and has the historical record that we have.
This simple meeting house, made of gray stone and a foundation built of stones carried from the banks of the nearby river, is tucked away in the shadows of a modern downtown. It's an important sacred place historically, but it's even more important in the hearts of its parishioners. A direct descendant of St. John's is an imposing Gothic structure located at East 22nd and Euclid Avenue, Trinity Cathedral. As the number of Episcopalians grew on the east side, the need for a new church became evident. In more practical terms, worshipers just plain got tired of having to cross the Cuyahoga River to get to St. John's.
When people were having trouble rafting across the river to come to church, they decided it was time to open a branch on the east side of the river. And what is now Trinity Cathedral was in two other locations before we moved here in 1907 to open this cathedral.
The cornerstone for Trinity was laid in 1903, and the cathedral was consecrated in 1907.
When this cathedral was built, Euclid Avenue was known as Millionaires Row, and several of the families that were here, like the Mathers and the Guns, traveled or sent people to Europe on business and also for pleasure. And as they came back, they would keep the cathedral in mind, and they wanted to provide beautiful things to put in the cathedral. And so we've really been blessed with some very lovely sculptures and windows in this space.
Gothic cathedrals are often described as parables in stone, intended to capture the mind and stimulate the imagination. Trinity does just that. Trinity is one of the finest examples of Gothic architecture in the country and is known as the little gem of American cathedrals. It was designed by an important Cleveland architect, Charles Schweinfurth. His work is augmented by the works collected by caring parishioners. There is a stone carving above the baptistry that dates from the 16th century. The font contains stones from the River Jordan near the Damascus Ford where Jesus was baptized. Tucked next to an aisle is a panel that's from the 14th century. The chapel's marble altar came from Old Trinity Church, an earlier home of the parish at East 6th and Superior. Trinity's high altar is one block of Pavonazzo marble weighing 3.5 tons that was carved in place by Italian craftsmen. The top slab is of Sienna marble, and in the center is an inset block of Jerusalem stone from the quarry of Solomon. If you could stand where this stone came from, you would be just a few hundred yards from Calvary, where Jesus was crucified. Rising 18 feet above the altar is a carved stone reredos, made up of 59 statues representing characters of ancient and modern church history. Trinity is full of incredible carvings. The choir stalls are English oak, carved in Germany. Each carving is different. The windows in Trinity are beautiful and inspiring. Each one is a depiction of the Bible's teachings, including St. Anne teaching her child, the Virgin Mary, to read the Torah. The medieval cathedral was the setting for the life of the entire community. Trinity is used for concerts, dinners, religious celebrations, and even brown bag luncheon organ concerts.
Each one of these churches or synagogues or mosques serves its neighborhood and community, and they're important centers. There are any number of ways that these facilities are used to bring life to the cities.
Nowhere does a church bring more life to the city than the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist, located at the corners of Superior and East Ninth.
Once a year, St. Ignatius High School gathers all of their students, faculty, and staff. They come to the cathedral for what they call the Mass of the Holy Spirit to begin their academic year.
Cathedral of St. John is indeed the center of activity for Roman Catholics in the Cleveland Diocese.
I believe Robert Louis Stevenson might have used these words that people were never so blessed as when they created a cathedral. And in the words of "Here comes everyone," and that's certainly true in our cathedral church on a daily basis.
Bishop Anthony Pilla, a native Clevelander, is the true pastor of St. John the Evangelist. In his homily to the students, he referred to St. John as the mother church for Roman Catholics in the diocese. The cathedral is that. Established by the first Bishop of Cleveland, Amadeus Rapp, shortly after his appointment in 1847, it replaced the first Catholic church in Cleveland, St. Mary's on the Flats, located near what is now an industrial area near a bend in the Cuyahoga River. The architect was a young man in his 20s, Patrick Keeley, who went on to build 16 Catholic cathedrals and an estimated 500 to 700 other churches nationally.
When Bishop Rapp selected what's now known as East Ninth and Superior, this was out in the country, and the decision to build here was not accepted by a lot of people, but we're delighted.
But the cathedral served its people well for 100 years, until the original structure was virtually demolished, closing it for 2 years.
They blew out the back and front walls, and they expanded the seating capacity, and that was done in 1946 to 1948 in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Diocese of Cleveland, and as well as the cathedral.
The original brick exterior was replaced with Tennessee crab orchard sandstone. The beautiful stained glass windows were retained, as well as the ceiling vaults and supporting columns.
One of the things that people don't know as they're passing the cathedral is that it's also a cemetery. 8 bishops are buried in our cathedral, bishops who have served the Diocese of Cleveland since the days of Bishop Rapp. When you first come into the cathedral, something that is very noticeable is the altar and then the great wooden reredos that has the statues of John the Evangelist and the other evangelists and Peter and Paul. Something that's really impressed me over the years is found on the floor in the back. People's shoes have worn away the tile floor. I think it's a real tribute to the countless number of people who have come through the door and they kneel in prayer for just a moment or two.
Cleveland's religious life is marked with a variety that few other northern industrial cities can match. It has added a richness to a mosaic that is still under construction. For close to 100 years, Antioch Baptist Church has provided leadership in the Cleveland community. Located at the corner of East 89th and Cedar, it has been in the forefront of community activism. It's another example of a church that stayed when others ran. Its present pastor, Reverend Marvin McMickle, was looking for just such a church in the inner city.
I did not want to spend the rest of my life in suburbia. And so I came to Cleveland looking for an inner city church, looking for the challenges of responding to the problems of urban America. And this church has had a very long history of involvement. This church was founded in 1892. It was founded by 9 people down on 24th and Central. That was the center of the black population in Cleveland.
Antioch Baptist Sacred Place is a building full of surprises for those who take the time to study its features. It's the kind of building we might tend to ignore as we drive past it intent on our commute. Its design reflects the Romanesque style popular in America during the 1880s and 90s, but its real beauty lies within its red brick walls.
It is a very warm place. This wood ceiling, I don't think, could ever be reconstructed. This used to be the Bolton Avenue Presbyterian Church. They sold it to us in 1936. The cornerstone of this building suggests that it was built in 1902 or so, which makes the church almost 100 years old. But it is a beautiful church. The sanctuary seats about 900 persons, and we fill it every week. I think that churches serve a stabilizing function in neighborhoods.
Antioch's pastor never lets his congregation forget where they came from, nor the neighborhood where they worship. So they set up a tent in their backyard in which to conduct revival services.
Let the world see you outside engaging in the acts of your faith, and hopefully they'll come in and join you.
Antioch Baptist is a wonderfully warm building in terms of its architecture and its people. And with a neighborhood that's safe and secure, it's worth stopping in and enjoying. It's another Cleveland sacred landmark. In the 1840s, Cleveland's religious landscape began to broaden as Catholic, Jewish, and Eastern Orthodox churches, mosques, and synagogues were added in large numbers over the next 60 years. The early Irish, German, and Czech immigrants established a pattern that later ethnic arrivals would follow. They developed their own self-segregated nationality parishes, providing a comfortable network that provided everything they could possibly need. St. Stephen Roman Catholic Church can be traced to 1869, when a parish was established at the request of German-speaking Catholics. St. Stephen possesses some of the most important ecclesiastical artwork in the country. One of its parishioners and church historian, Tim Barrett, says it was no easy task to get the church built.
Several of the parishioners actually mortgaged their homes so there would be enough money to keep the construction going forward. They put the first set of stained glass windows in, and on July 2nd, 1876, they have their very first service in this church 2 days before the nation celebrated its centennial.
St. Stephen has been blessed by loyal, very faithful parishioners. Elaine Marquardt is typical. Her family's involvement goes back to the parish's earliest beginnings.
My great-great-grandfather was founder of City Ice and Fuel along with his brothers. They used horse and wagons from the City Ice and Fuel Company to haul the stone from the quarries around Vermilion to build the church here at St. Stephen's, and that I think it took something like 3 to 5 days to make the trip to pick up stone and haul it back.
The sacrifices made by the parishioners paid off. They have left a legacy that is breathtakingly beautiful.
The wooden statues in the church are hand-carved, and then the exterior is painted with many colors, polychromed as we call it. Most of the statues were made in Munich, Germany, and shipped here in 1893. The woodwork in the church really celebrates the Germans' ability to work with wood.
The pulpit is particularly noteworthy. It's a superb freestanding structure, 25 feet tall, with an intricately carved canopy. Before its installation, it was on exhibition in the World's Columbian Exposition held in Chicago in 1893. Today, St. Stephen is an active church that has an adjoining school. The neighborhood has made a startling comeback. It's safe, and there's remodeling and renovation going on all around the area. The church's pastor, Father Michael Franz.
When the neighbors got together, our councilman at that time was Ray Pianca, who's now housing court judge. He had the idea that it would be a good gesture and a signal to what we're trying to do, to ring the church bells every day when the children got out of school, as a sign that the neighborhood cares about these children and is going to watch over them. This was my first parish assignment in the city. In my previous assignments, the work was much more narrowly focused on spiritual things, but here you have to be kind of a jack of all trades to make the parish go.
However, Father Franz wouldn't trade his hectic work for his former assignment in the suburbs.
Part of the problem in the suburbs, it's too quiet. You have the feeling that you don't have the life out there that you have in the city.
It's like where my roots are. I'm just beginning to realize how much this church means to me, even though I've grown up here and been here, you know, for many years. There's so much of it that I really wasn't aware of how important it is to my life until now.
Many of Cleveland's sacred landmarks have not done as well as St. Stephen Church. But in a remarkable story, one of the doomed churches, St. Joseph's on Woodland Avenue, now demolished, provided St. Stephen's with 3 stained glass windows to replace those blown out by a 1953 tornado. For 40 years, the holes left by the storm had been boarded up. Now sunlight streams through the leaded glass windows created by Meyer Studios in Munich, Germany at the turn of the century. St. Joseph was one of the early victims of urban renewal and interstate highway construction. This 1965 photograph shows St. Joseph's, another German nationality church, marooned, as blocks of its supporting neighborhood were systematically destroyed. The loss of the neighborhood and the church leaves all of us poor.
Structures such as this are unique to the inner city, and they add an edge, a difference, a richness to a neighborhood that you will not find in the suburbs. These are things that will be built, that were built and will never be built again. And so, again, when you walk inside these things and you realize, no, they're not crumbling, they're not falling down, they still have a tremendous richness. You walk into the inside and they really are some of the hidden gems of Cleveland, and they're being utilized. They're not simply museums.
If there was ever an area that epitomized the melting pot theory of American life, it's the Tremont area on Cleveland's west side. Industries surrounding the area, combined with ample quality housing, attracted Irish, Germans, Poles, Greeks, Syrians, Ukrainians, Russians, and Puerto Ricans, to mention just a few. This influx meant churches, and Tremont has more churches per capita than almost any area in the world. Churches of infinite variety. If ever an area could be described as the United Nations, it's Tremont. Located on Starkweather Avenue in Tremont is St. Theodosius Russian Orthodox Cathedral that became famous as the site for portions of the feature film The Deer Hunter. The parish celebrated its centennial in 1996, although the church was started in 1911. The man who serves St. Theodosius is Father Jason Cabanadzi.
I think people think of us as, if you want to make a generalization, as kind of very ethnically enclosed, that this is something you have to be Russian to participate in. But now that perception is changing. Other people are realizing that this is for everyone who wants to believe in this. And so we do everything in English here.
Father Jason remembers the parishioners of his youth growing up in the church.
My impressions were of the piety of the people. This is where you encounter God in a very special way. This congregation built a church with help from the Tsar of Russia at that time in 1911. There's 13 domes, one representing Christ, which is in the middle, the largest one, and then the other 12, the apostles. Orthodox churches don't have to have 13 domes on top. There are many that only have one, some none. It speaks of another world, and that world being the kingdom of heaven.
To walk through the cathedral is to feel as if you're totally enveloped in a work of art. And everything in the church has a meaning. Nothing's accidental.
The icon screen represents, first of all, the natural separation between the sanctuary and the nave of the church, which is from the Jewish temple. As you gather here and anticipate Christ's coming again, you have this visual representation of his kingdom. And that's what the church is doing, why we have architecture the way we do, why we have the walls painted the way they are.
For many parishioners, that calling is a lifelong commitment to the church.
I sincerely believe that the Holy Spirit has been responsible for so many things that have happened in my life that kept me in the church and keeps me in that faith of my fathers. You think in terms of being hatched, matched, and dispatched. And I was baptized here, married here, and looking forward to being buried from here.
I was born into the church. I have, from my youth, been a member of the Orthodox Church.
Ken Kovacs is the first American-born choir director at St. Theodosius. He's well aware of the importance of viable religious institutions to cities.
I think our churches, our synagogues, our temples, our mosques, the religious institutions in community really help to connect people up. We're an inner city church. I mean, you can't get any closer to the center of the city than here in the Tremont area.
The freeways came through this neighborhood and pretty much destroyed it. And the parishioners just decided to stay here. Whatever the freeways did, it can be overcome. We're here, we're thriving, we're functioning. Nothing stops it, you know? The gates of hell will not prevail against the church, neither will freeways. Life goes on.
A close neighbor of St. Theodosius is Pilgrim Congregational Church, located on West 14th. Pilgrim has a long and enviable history of helping the less fortunate in the community. It's also noted for its concerts and reliance on good music. Pilgrim was dedicated in 1894, but its beginning was as a Sunday school in 1854. The structure is a unique design, and its dynamic pastor, Reverend Laurie Hafner, is proud of its heritage.
There was a debate that even though this church was American-made and American-crafted, they still thought that stained glass windows should come from Europe. Someone had heard about someone named Tiffany in New York who was creating some fairly decent windows, and they decided, in keeping with the American theme, that they would go ahead and hire Tiffany to put some windows in. It has a really remarkable history. We have the first church library here, the first kindergarten in the city of Cleveland. The Visiting Nurses Association got its start here. We were the first building west of the Cuyahoga to have indoor electricity.
This beautiful church, now a bustling and busy place, came within an eyelash of closing its doors. Reverend Hafner is credited with saving the congregation, but she yields the credit to her parishioners who just wouldn't quit.
I came in June of 1990, and at the time there were a few die-hard, very faithful souls who had worked very diligently and very hard at keeping these church doors open, even though folks had suggested to them that maybe there would be grace in closing the doors and moving out to the suburbs.
To see the church now is to see an asset in the inner city that was well worth the struggle. Another important area of the city of Cleveland is University Circle. Many important religious denominations located there, including the imposing Tifereth Israel Temple, often just called the Temple. Designed by Boston architect Charles Greco, the temple is used today just for High Holy Day services. The congregation is continuing to develop a complex on Shaker Boulevard as its need for the older temple is reduced. But the memories wrapped up in this glorious structure draw people back for visits. The memories are also of a proud people who've contributed greatly to Cleveland and its development. Ruth Danziger is compiling a pictorial history of the Tifereth Israel Temple.
This building is located at 105th Street and what is now called Silver Park. Originally, Silver Park was Ansel Road. This is the third building that is owned by Tifereth Israel. The building was finally built in 1923, and the building was dedicated in 1924.
The move to Tifereth Israel Temple was made because the congregation was growing in size and prosperity, reflecting a long, successful history for Jews in Cleveland. The temple was served by a succession of dynamic and involved leaders, from Rabbi Moses Gries to Abba Hillel Silver and his son Daniel. The two Silvers dominated the temple's history for a total of 72 years. The temple's regarded as one of the most beautiful religious structures in the country.
The architecture is Byzantine. After all, the Jewish religion came from the Middle East, and so this echoes that the architecture that you find in the Middle East. Its dome is 88 feet above the ground and gives the sanctuary an imposing look. The most important part of the sanctuary is the Ark, which contains the scrolls. And the scrolls are read every week. And the scrolls contain the Old Testament. As it is, we do not call it the Old Testament. We call it the Torah.
The Tifereth Israel Temple is blessed with a beautiful, compact chapel.
The chapel seats about 175 people and is used for small weddings and also bar and bat mitzvahs and for funerals. They have stained glass windows that were created by an artist whose name is Arthur Zick. They are memorials to the fallen of the Second World War. A place of worship is more than just brick and mortar. It involves memories, and it involves people. And there are a great many people who feel very emotional about the very idea of giving this up. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen to this building.
One of the temple's neighbors is located just a short walk away. It's Amasa Stone Chapel, and it's located on the campus of Case Western Reserve University, across Euclid Avenue from Severance Hall. It was commissioned in 1911 by Clara Stone Hay and Flora Stone Mather in memory of their father.
Amasa Stone was the man who financed the move of this college from Hudson, Ohio to Cleveland, Ohio. There's a little sculpture outside which portrays Amasa Stone. It's his head. That piece of stonework used to be part of the Union Terminal, the old Union Terminal before the current terminal tower. As far as the banners are concerned, what they represent are the various colleges and schools of this university or the university itself, and each one of them is authentic.
The architect for Amasa Stone Chapel was Henry Vaughan of Boston, known for his work designing the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and for being well-schooled in early medieval styles. Although not large, this gem of a sacred landmark is busy with musical events, weddings, and memorial services. Just around the corner from the chapel on Mayfield Road in the heart of Little Italy is Holy Rosary Catholic Church, Bishop Anthony Pillar's home church, the place where he was baptized. On the Feast of the Assumption, Little Italy takes on an air of festivity and joyous celebration. And it begins with a Mass that is celebrated by the bishop to an overflow crowd. The church has recently been renovated, which included a new altar. Dedicated in 1909, it's been the heart and soul of this Italian parish. After the Mass, the statue of the Virgin Mary is paraded through the neighborhood. Money is traditionally pinned on ribbons hung around the statue of the Virgin Mary. Then it's collected and donated to fund scholarships for area children. Everyone's welcome to watch the procession as it winds through the streets of Little Italy, and nowhere is it more evident that Cleveland's ethnic groups have brought an enduring strength to the rich fabric of the city.
Le temperamento è buono, sta tutto aperto, vede qua.
After Mass and the procession, it's time for families to gather from all over the country to break bread and celebrate their heritage. It's a time to remember what the church has meant to them.
Our life was centered around the church. We grew up in the church. It was part of our social life. And the priests were all friends, and they'd come over for dinner. We all know everyone's problems, and we all are one big family, and we all help each other.
Just up the hill from the celebration in Little Italy is an oasis, Lakeview Cemetery, a place where many famous Clevelanders are buried dating back to 1869. It's also where one of Cleveland's most notable structures can be found, Wade Memorial Chapel.
Wade Chapel was built in honor of Jessup Wade, who was the first president of Lakeview Cemetery and also the founder of the Western Union Telegraph Company. His grandson wanted to build a monument that would last at least 500 years in honor of his grandfather.
The result is a memorial that's Spartan on the outside, but stunningly beautiful inside. The interior was designed entirely by Louis Comfort Tiffany.
The window that you see is the Tiffany window, which Tiffany was famous for. That's the first thing that catches your eye, and he did win a gold medal for it at the Paris Exposition. The Wades were traveling in France at the time, and they saw the window, and they bought the window, and then they commissioned Tiffany to build the interior of the chapel around the theme of the window.
The theme of the window depicts the resurrection of Christ. It's flanked by scenes from the Old Testament and patron saints of Christianity, exquisitely rendered in shimmering golden glass mosaic.
On the left wall, as you face the window, it is the Old Testament. And you see what are considered the 7 pillars of wisdom, the prophets from the Old Testament, and they are rowing the ship because we are what they call the voyage of life, all headed for the resurrection window. And the person steering the vessel is death, and death is wrapped in chains, showing you life over death with the sword pointed down. On the east wall, then, would be the ship, the saints from the New Testament. And the person who is the steer person and has their hands on the rudder is time. Time is perpetual, time is ongoing, time is never ending. And then if you take a look, the admiral of that ship, and you'll see the sparkle in the eye, it says the grace of God. So it's like God is watching and God is steering this particular vessel.
Tiffany set out to make the Wade Memorial a masterpiece. Nothing is random. Everything was designed to be part of the whole. There's literally nothing like this masterpiece anywhere in the world. The wood in the pews is cedars of Lebanon, the same material used in the construction of Solomon's Temple. As you study the incredibly beautiful resurrection window, you can see why Tiffany's work defies comparison. Lakeview Cemetery is also the location of the first presidential monument in the country and is considered one of the greatest mausoleums in the world. Paid for by private donations, it was built of native Ohio sandstone. 5 panels surround a porch-like platform and depict Garfield's life and death. These panels include more than 100 life-size figures. In the center of the monument is the Memorial Hall, with a statue of Garfield by sculptor Alexander Doyle, who got the marble from the famed quarries near Carrara, Italy, which were first opened by Leonardo da Vinci. The interior dome is decorated with rare gold and stone mosaic, with winged figures symbolizing the points of the compass. Below the dome, on the sides of the chamber, are stone mosaic panels depicting a mourning procession. The hall is lighted through stained glass windows. These and 4 other window-like panels represent the 13 original states and Ohio. In the crypt, at the lowest level, are the bronze caskets of Garfield and his wife Lucretia, who died 37 years after her husband. Without a doubt, the Garfield Monument is unique among Cleveland's sacred landmarks. Cleveland's rich diversity of religions and concentration of churches is further illustrated by the fact that the prominent tower of the First Church of Christ Scientist on Overlook Road in Cleveland Heights can be seen from both the Garfield Monument as well as from the streets of Little Italy. The church is often called Little Severance because of its remarkable similarity of design with the home of the Cleveland Orchestra. No wonder. The same architects designed both buildings.
This particular structure was built in the late 1920s, and its first service was held in March of 1931. This is a very beautiful edifice, but we concentrate on the spiritual essence of truth.
Christian Science churches are not very ornate as such. They can be very large edifices, as this particular building is, or they can be very small churches.
First Church of Christ Scientist represents a remarkable example of early American design. There is a unique calm in the sanctuary of the church with its intricate carvings on the platform. Because the church's teachings are focused on the spiritual, the design is there to complement worship services, not intrude or overpower them. There's a misconception that most, if not all, church congregations located in areas that have declined in the city have abandoned the original church. Well, this may be true of some. There are many that not only stayed, but have expanded their outreach to the community. One such church is Olivet Institutional Baptist Church on Quincy at East 89th. While this church traces its roots to a mission established in Cleveland in 1884, its history of involvement has never wavered.
Early on, our congregation, the Olivet congregation, identified with the civil rights movement, and especially giving an embrace to the movement led by the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He preached here many times. The Reverend Jesse Jackson received some of his early orientation in ministry right here. Our church has been on the cutting edge.
The buildings that house the ministries of Olivet Institutional Baptist Church were erected in the 1950s and 60s. While simple and plain, they serve to shelter and sustain a large active ministry that reaches out to people. But there have been changes.
This church, for instance, has become a regional church. And by that I mean many of our parishioners commute to church. Many of our parishioners are second and third generation members. Their families have worked hard in the steel mills or the iron foundries of Cleveland, but they are committed to Fairfax, they're committed to Cleveland, they're committed to their church.
Nowhere is the commitment more evident than on the streets surrounding Olivet Baptist. New and renovated housing is absolutely beautiful, returning neighborhoods to families and restoring their faith in the system. And there's even more reason for optimism, a result of a major new commitment by Olivet's ministers and congregation and their new partners at university hospitals.
Think about the fact that those persons occupying those new dwellings, as well as those who have been in the community for decades, can walk a block to the best medical care offered anywhere.
The new medical facility is much more than a clinic and will provide many different medical services. It'll also have a chapel where counseling and meditation will be provided for patients and families. Some of Olivet's loyal parishioners have worked together for over 50 years just across the street in the city barber shop. 3 of the church's deacons often gather to cut hair, digest the latest news, and give praise to their God. They're also proud that their barbershop has been in existence for over 50 years, all within a block of the church.
We started down by the red light and has been moving this way ever since. And this is furthest west as we've been. All the rest was from the red light this way.
Each man has been a member of the church for an average of 50 years.
That church means another family to me. Without that church, it'd just be the same as my wife. My wife been married 50 years, and without that church, I just couldn't hardly make it. And that's the only thing I look forward to every day up to 7 days a week.
Olivet Institutional Baptist Church is a greater part of my life. It has been, I've been a member there for 50 years.
This church means everything to me. This church here is giving birth. When a church is giving birth, it's growing, you should be here sometime to see it. So that's the reason I know God's program will always be, regardless. Even after I'm gone and my bones is bleached, it'll still go on.
The church, and especially the African American church, has been and remains the most stabilized and stabilizing institution in the community. The church did not leave the community, even in some instances when the community left the church.
One church that has been a constant presence in Cleveland is the Old Stone Church on Public Square. More properly titled First Presbyterian Church, it's been on the same site since 1853 and has witnessed such historic events as the public exhibition of President Lincoln's funeral bier and the lighting of the country's first street lamps in 1879. Of Victorian Romanesque design, Old Stone Church's interior is replete with golden oak and dark mahogany paneling. Outstanding stained glass windows were added during the years following the sanctuary's restoration of 1884. In 1885, the window overlooking Public Square was dedicated in memory of Amasa Stone, a recurring name when talking about sacred landmarks in Cleveland. This magnificent window was designed by the internationally known artist John LaFarge. A half-dozen Tiffany windows grace the sanctuary, and several are signed. The organ in Old Stone Church is an impressive feature of the sanctuary. It was built by Cleveland's internationally famous Holtkamp Company and dedicated in 1976. The problems of keeping such an old building in good condition is an expensive proposition. The church has undergone recent renovation and restoration that expresses a new vitality.
Many people have commented to me as I've been around the city, oh, that museum. Well, we're not a museum, we're vital and active. It seems to me having an active congregation, a renovated church building in the heart of the city says something about Cleveland as well as our particular congregation.
Over the past 150 years, waves of immigrants have arrived, each bringing bits of their own culture and beliefs. St. Stanislaus Church, located in the heart of Slavic Village on East 65th Street, is the mother parish for Polish Roman Catholics. Established in 1873, it has served as a bastion of Polish culture for all those years. Affectionately nicknamed St. Stan's, it's one of the largest Gothic-style churches in the United States. St. Stan's originally had incredible 232-foot-high steeples that could be seen all the way from downtown Cleveland. Early immigrants would get off the train at the station, near where Jacobs Field is today, and they'd be pointed toward the huge twin spires and told, "There's St. Stan's, just head toward those steeples." Today's pastor, Father William Gulas, tells what happened to the steeples.
In 1909, a so-called tornado went through. They didn't call it that, but it was a high wind, and we had steeples on this church that went up to 232 feet. They fell on the roof, but also some of the pieces fell several ways and killed a child.
Out of respect for the death of the child, St. Stan's steeples were never replaced. The interior of this grand old church is beautiful, but it's due for a total renovation over the next few years. One area was selected as a test strip prior to total restoration. It's an amazing contrast with the original grime-covered surfaces. But nothing can hide the church's integral beauty. Niches house statues of exquisite sculptural work. The church's sacred vessels are breathtaking in their beauty. And in 1969, the visiting Archbishop of Krakow, Poland, presented the church with a relic of St. Stanislaus in gratitude for help the Church of Poland had received from the congregation. The Archbishop went on to become His Holiness Pope John Paul II. There are incredibly detailed side altars, gorgeous stained glass windows. You could spend a lifetime taking in the splendor of St. Stan's. And some have.
The church is my home, my spiritual home, and my anchor. I was born in this neighborhood. I come to Mass every single day. I look upon it as something very, very special. Whenever I have problems and concerns, I bring them to my church.
Another longtime parishioner used to own a candy store right across from the church and school. He and his wife still live in the same building. They've been there for 65 years.
I've been a member of this parish when I was single, and it's 65 years now that I belong to this parish. It's a foundation of this area, I'd say. And I feel that once a church is out of a community, it becomes just another community. And the church is very important to have in the Slavic village here.
Father Dennis O'Grady, pastor of St. Michael's Roman Catholic Church at the corner of Scranton and Clark Roads, gets his exercise and keeps in touch with his predominantly Spanish-speaking parishioners by rollerblading through the neighborhood. It's a scene most suburbanites find hard to believe. The image of this area is that it's not a safe place to be, and it certainly isn't the place you'd want to live. Father O'Grady begs to differ.
Some of those great, big, beautiful old homes have been beautifully restored lately, and there seems to be a little bit of a fever going on, people striving to improve their homes and take care of their yards.
One of Father O'Grady's parishioners is Norv Wallington. One of the reasons St. Michael Church, built in 1892, is on the rebound. This incredibly beautiful church, built as a German nationality church, is being brought back by the efforts of people like Norv and Father O'Grady. Once a healthy parish, the cause of its demise was witnessed by Father O'Grady.
I came here in 1966. There were about 2,000 families at the time, but the state of Ohio had just begun acquiring property for the construction of Interstate 71, knifing right through the parish, and that was still underway when Interstate 90 came knifing through the same parish. We have two major interstate highways that caused hundreds of families to be relocated out of the city of Cleveland.
While it hasn't been easy, Father O'Grady seems to have stemmed the tide. He's fluent in Spanish now and has worked with his congregation to restore elements of the church. It's his love of this building that helps keep him going.
This church is one of the most beautiful in the entire city and perhaps the entire country. And today, too, people come in and they stand with their mouths open in amazement. The greatest aspect of this church or feature is the warm golden oak woodwork. It is so extensive and so beautifully done that it just exudes a certain warmth. One almost gets the feeling of being surrounded by holiness and like a little taste of heaven.
Many of Cleveland's sacred landmarks have become mother churches, giving birth to other congregations, many located in the suburbs. Typical is Saints Peter and Paul Ukrainian Catholic Church on West 7th Street in Cleveland. It spun off 3 other parishes in the county, including St. Josaphat Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral on State Road in Parma. This church is a work in progress. Its pastor, Father Michael.
We started using it on June 24th, 1985. I recall the date exactly. There was nothing in here. We had a temporary altar set up. All the walls were bare. And then I convinced the building committee at the time that since they have such a beautiful building, they just don't want to throw anything on the inside. So that's why I decided we would do things slowly, but put in good stuff here and put the things in the artwork as we had the funds.
Much of what church has accomplished today is due to the dedication of its parishioners. St. Josaphat is no exception. Dozens of volunteers gather together every Thursday and Friday morning in an adjacent building to the cathedral and make Ukrainian pierogies, their version of pierogies. For hours, they visit across tables and over steaming vats, ceaselessly working, making thousands of pierogies for sale. The money goes for all sorts of church needs, from augmenting the school's budget to paying for new mosaics to finish their place of worship.
Some people are impressed by the artwork, but I think it's what's inside that really counts, how they feel inside their soul when they come to church and attend the service, what they get out of it.
The Cleveland area is a rich fabric of intertwined cultures. It's a vibrant and growing fact of everyday life. Just as the city has absorbed dozens of ethnic groups and religions, today that evolution continues. At the Islamic Center of Cleveland in Parma, the Imam Damra leads his Muslim congregation in weekly prayer and devotion. But unfortunately, just like almost every other single ethnic group that has tried to gain a foothold in a community, the Muslims suffer from a profound misunderstanding of who and what they are. And the Muslims are hardly strangers to this country.
I believe that in the turning of this century, Muslims start coming from different parts of the world to America to work. Islam in the 90s being the most fastest growing religion in America. This is a well-known fact. And Muslims really comprises of so many ethnic background, so many languages, so many races. And without exaggeration, we have close to 50 countries or ethnicities here in our mosque.
To dispel unfortunate stereotypes, the Muslims at the Islamic Center welcome any and all faiths and cultures to come in and get to know who they are and what they believe in.
The mosque is always open for all people. Mosque is for Muslim and non-Muslim. And we're here to say to our fellow American friends and people in general that we are here to live in peace and harmony with the rest of the society around us.
To live in peace and harmony with the rest of society around us. Not a bad idea. Certainly it would fit nicely into this look at Holy Cleveland, our sacred landmarks. As we toured these magnificent structures, spoke with the faithful who attend them, and listened to those who ministered to their needs, there's an overwhelming feeling that whatever problems a city like Cleveland has in its neighborhoods, they can be diminished if there's a viable church nearby. Many clergy felt, with surprise in their voice, that the renaissance of downtown Cleveland has had a positive effect on their church and their neighborhood. That there's a feeling that perhaps we can all pull this off. That we can bring our churches, our sacred landmarks, back from the brink, and that while some probably won't make it, we can save most. Given that sacred landmarks are places where we can experience a real work of art that is not part of a museum, study and talk about cultural similarities, get to know dedicated individuals who have a genuine love for their fellow man, scrutinize incredible objects and artifacts, and find an alternative for suburban sameness. It seems that studying Holy Cleveland a little closer might help us all to survive.